Under section 25, again, that's for the employer of the act, subsection 2, clause H, it reads, this is the big one for us in safety, an employer shall take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of the worker. Let me say that again. Section 25, 2H of the act, an employer shall take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of the worker. That's every and reasonable. So you have to document and make notes on that. The law is used in the absence, this clause is used in the absence of something more specific. So if we can't find something, if the Ministry of Labor can't find anything in the regulations specific, they will go to this clause here. So consider it this way, if somebody gets hurt, there's likely somebody's at fault, and not necessarily the injured worker either. So they may use this clause. Sectors like landscaping who fall under Regulation 851 for an industrial establishment, while they're at their office, while they're commuting to the job site, but most of their job sites probably fall under Construction Regulation 213 at the job site. So if something happened midway, the ministry might use that clause. So if you were to ask me, hey Marty, is such and such law? If I can't think of a particular spot in the act, then I'm going to probably point to 25-2H, the reasonable clause or due diligence clause. Again, in the area for employers, section 25, subsection 2, clause J, it reads that employers shall prepare and review at least annually a written occupational health and safety policy and develop and maintain a program to implement the policy. So your policy is just a one-page document that states about who's going to be protected, visitors, guests, including employees, and who's accountable for this, and how it always has to be signed by the top official on site. Make sure that you set an alarm in your Outlook calendar or something every year, whatever the calendar year or fiscal year that you're dating that the new person or the existing person, whoever's the highest, re-signs and redates that. And again, that's the first impression for the Ministry of Labor, right? Once you have the policy written, posted in that conspicuous location, what I talked about earlier, and there's nothing worse than the inspector walking in, seeing your health and safety policy laminated, even hanging on the lobby wall, and it's dated from 1979. That's not gonna work probably. Now the program, that was a policy. The program is all the other documentation that's related to health and safety, including testing and qualifications and certificates and that. Think of it as a big 3-ring binder, and all the tabs in the binder are going to be your significant hazards like lockout, tagout for controlling energy. Your maintenance people know about this. Lifting devices that are cranes and lift trucks, and even in healthcare for patients, right? The big one for every workplace is violence and harassment and bullying, right? So that would be a tab in your book, like vehicle safety if you have people driving a fleet of company vehicles. So those are good points to remember. Section 25, subsection 1, clause B, this is with 392 orders from last year. An employer shall ensure that the equipment, materials, and protective devices provided by the employer are maintained in good enough condition. So when I hear about stuff like that, I think about, well, what does the manufacturer say about the frequency of the oil changes or the changes of the components within the equipment? How often do they have to be checked? That kind of stuff. When I hear the word prescribed duties, it kind of means there's a reference to it in one of the regulations, or pull out a CSA standard, see if it's related to the topic at hand, right? And remember that if you purchase new or used equipment, speaking about equipment and devices, or even relocating an existing unit within the facility or to the adjoining building, you need to complete a pre-start engineering review and to make sure that the equipment meets our codes and standards here in Canada. In the Act, Section 25, Clause 2, subsection I, with 507 orders reads, an employer shall post in the workplace a copy of the Act and any explanatory material prepared by the Ministry of Labor in both English or French or the majority language, whatever that might be, outlining the rights, the responsibilities, and duties of all workers. English as a second language is not an out for safety. It doesn't mean it's not a free pass. It means we don't have to train those people just because they can't understand us. There's lots of help out there for resources. So for posting the Act, a copy of the Act should be affixed to your safety board. Make sure it says safety board at the top too, so it's clear that that's what it's there for, so all employees can access it. Members of the safety committee, the health and safety rep, management should probably have their own copies of the act, so they have references to that. However, all of this is available online, very easy to download and print as well. Not a lot of color involved with it, it's just it'll print out like a PDF. So do not buy a copy of the act every year. This is a question I get quite often, especially if nothing new applies. If you flip through the act this year and you see grayed out areas, those grayed out areas are areas that they're looking at implementing next year. Regardless of when the book is printed, it could be coming out, it usually comes out in March. The laws that change, the new laws are effective as of the calendar year, January 1st. So make sure you have enough copies for people around, and actually make the copies look used. So spill some coffee on your copy of your act so that when the Ministry of Labor comes by, it looks like you've used it before at least once. So I want to leave you with 4 points here. These are my final words of advice, overall general stuff that I've picked up over the last 14 years of doing this. One of the things that I stress at the very beginning of a management course or a supervisor due diligence course is if it's not written down, it did not happen. So document the good, the bad, the everything. All your discussions, what happened. Even when you pat someone on the back for wearing their safety glasses, I would want to make sure I have a documentation of that event so I can prove that I do that, as well as issue any kind of corrective actions. Point number 2, while controlling hazards, don't inadvertently create a new hazard by way of controlling an existing one. An easy example would be a ergonomic mat. Although they are beveled, I consider them to be a bit of a tripping hazard, so we're trying to ease the back and the discomfort of standing in one spot, but we're also creating a trip hazard, so be careful of that. My 3rd point before I leave you is just because you're doing things a certain way right now, it doesn't mean that it's the safest way. And a clean record, no accidents, I don't care how many lost time injuries your score clock says up there, it doesn't mean you haven't had an accident or an incident, and it doesn't mean that you're absolutely safe, right? So just because we have a clean record, if that's the case, we always want to vet or review our policies and procedures and make sure they're up to date at least annually, and document to get proof, to provide proof of that. And finally, I call the mindset, since we've had little to no safety issues, we won't have that in the future. I call that a false sense of compliance. I think there's a lot of companies out there that run according to a false sense of compliance, thinking that they're doing enough or doing the right thing, using the metric of no accidents as the defining factor of success, where it's got a lot more involved than that. And just finally, thank you for taking the time to read through, follow me on this video. Look next month in July for the follow-up video. We'll talk about Regulation 851. You can visit my company's website at www.hasco.ca, hasco.ca. Email me a question, marty@hasco.ca, or anything you have. You want a third opinion or a second opinion, call me. You can find me on LinkedIn. And of course, thank you very much, and happy Canada Day as well. Enjoy your long weekend and be safe out there. Play safe. Thanks. Bye for now.